Chapter 4 The Boy at the Heart of the Splash. Oliver. The spring tide had risen to its highest point. A few days earlier, my father had tried to explain tides to Tova and me, showing us pictures of how they worked. Either you have the sun, the new moon, and the earth in a line left to right, or the sun, the earth in the middle, and the full moon lined in that sequence. Why these different positions produce the same great highs and lows still confuses me to this day. Sure, if you have the sun and moon on one side of the earth, I can see how their combined gravitational pull would tug the waters. But if the sun and the moon are on opposite sides of the earth, why aren't the effects nullified? When back as a child I said that it didn't make sense, Pop explained that it had to do with angles, and Tova, who was drawing a picture of the earth with water splashing out, looked up. "What do the angels do?" she asked, which made our father laugh. Regardless, angels or angles, the spring tide had risen to its highest point. It was a nice morning, and I was up in a tree thinking about what my father had said earlier concerning tides. The sun, the moon, and our earth were in a line. I looked for the moon, but it was way too new to be seen in the sky. For a moment, nothing moved, not the water, the wind, not one shadow or leaf. From where I sat, the world around lay inexplicably still. Words of my father rang in my head. "All will be well." He often said this during the calm at the changing of the tides, though for me on that morning things were already pretty good as they were. I had no complaints, just a view from above, hoping to spot a pirate ship, a whale, a man-o-war jellyfish. Nothing could bring me down. Then, as happens sometimes, I lost my balance and fell into the creek from that limb of the old hackberry tree. I fell smack into the middle of the neat and tidy stillness, coming down with a splash. And there I sat, suddenly wet, no longer hidden. The water was almost 2 feet deep where I'd fallen, deep enough to soak me head to toe. I looked up from my seat in the cold, brackish water and saw my mother on the grassy bank. She leaned forward, widening her eyes my way as though I was the most unexpected sight. But I wasn't unexpected. I was her son. "Oliver?" she called. "What? Is that you?" I fell. Another miracle. Amazing. "Where were you?" "I fell," I repeated, hoping to elicit less joy and more concern. "I heard, but from where?" "The tree," I said, which should have been obvious. "Weren't you watching?" My younger sister, who I liked to call Cricket, sat beside our mother in the fresh green grass. We had walked there, arriving not 15 minutes before my fall. We'd left our house, gone out the drive, then a half-mile or so down the road we went to this well-worn path alongside the winter wheat. The path ended up at the banks of the Chicomico Creek, a secret place, though not so secret to us, on Vincent Cummings' land. Mama liked to go out walking when the morning began, to nudge through the trees, as she liked to say, stretching its light into the open, shaking songs from the birds and tickling her fancy. "Lo, the sun calls us from secrecy into service," she'd poetically say, turning her thought into alliteration. She didn't always say such notable things, though my memory is packed with that and similar quotes. Morning was the best time, according to our mother, for discovering things. My sister and I didn't mind. We both woke early. Physically, Tova was like a small version of our mother. Sometimes you couldn't tell the two apart. Of course, at 6 years old she was still half Mama's size. Even so, Papa would make out like he too was confused, mixing the both of them. "Is that my little cricket humming a song?" Papa'd say, entering the kitchen where our mother, clear as day, kneaded bread. "You must be blind and deaf. Oh, it's you, loafing in here." Papa liked to tease. You could tell Tova would be pretty when she got older, same way as you could tell the approach of a warm front by looking at the leading edge of clouds, or how you could tell the promise of a flower by looking at its bud. You could tell, too, that Tova would be a help to the world some day, because of how she'd hug anyone who was hurt, even a fly or baby squirrel. And you could tell she'd be smart by the way she'd quietly sit, listening around her, taking it all in as if she had every right. These were the rights granted her by life itself, to understand things. And why not? Why not be able to understand things as well, if not better, than anyone else in the world? After I fell, things were different. Mama and Cricket got up, for one. They came my way, casual. Mama clutched her notebook in her left hand, while in her right she held my sister's hand, gentle as a newborn chick. And then, as if out of nowhere, I saw things I had not seen before. A door had opened. What door? And why? It is a remarkable memory of mine, one I've been thinking about for many years now. It was as if I was witnessing the world for the first time. Looking suddenly became a talent of mine, like hitting a baseball or riding a bike. Maybe the fall had knocked something loose in my head, or it had opened my eyes that till then had been halfway shut. I saw the chants of an invisible frog, the snap of an unseen twig. I saw the glow of my sister's kindness and the gleam of my mother's mood. It was new and various things I noticed. I don't know why, unless I'd always been a part of such an expressive world, and my spill had just awakened me to it. "Remember Ons and Iona?" My mother said this when she reached the water's edge. "Remember Ons, how he was born?" "I do," said Tova. "He was delivered," reminded my mother, refreshing our memories despite Cricket's claim to know. "Delivered from the left hand of the sky down to the right, gentle as could be. And standing in the right hand, he lost his balance and tumbled to the earth. It shook him some to be born like this, but mostly he was pleased. Suddenly he was part of the world. Makes you think, doesn't it?" It was a story she'd told lots, and as was our mother's way, she secured our attention again, me sitting in cool water, Cricket high and dry. We thought we'd be in for another version then and there. "Tell it," said Tova. "Maybe later. You'll forget." "It's an old story," said our mother. "We're not old. Are you old?" "6 is kinda old," said my sister. "Well," my mother had something different to say. I could see she was excited. We waited, and she directed her words toward me with open arms. "There's this amazing story right here this morning. It's a miracle." "What miracle?" I asked. "Don't you see it?" I wanted to. I looked around. "The world," said our mother. "It's got life in every corner. And then you fall into place, on your birthday no less." It all seemed ordinary to me, but I didn't want to ruin her fun. "How old are you anyway on this beautiful day?" asked my mother. 9. 9? That's impossible." "It's true," I said. "First off, no way. How'd you get to be 9 in the blink of an eye?" "It's just how things work." "Last night, I remember it. Nothing was working. I was out alone, and the moon and the stars had left the sky. There wasn't a single sound, not one whirligig or bugaboo. So the entire place, well, it seemed empty. It was hard, and I don't mean difficult, I mean impenetrable. Impenetrable, well, that means that you're left out of something. Like a stone is impenetrable. You can't get into a stone, can you? Last night, the world was made of stone, and I couldn't get in. I felt lonely, like a lost turtle or a sad ghost. "Why a sad ghost?" asked Tova. "Ghosts, well, they're always missing something," said our mother, "or someone. It makes them sad. But sad ghosts and lonely people, they see things that non-lonely people don't see. They see how much they need others. So for me, the feeling was worth it, because it reminded me of both of you. And then dawn came, and I saw a redwing. I saw everything fresh. And ta-da! 2 beautiful children awoke in their beds, and here you both are." "I want to be Ta," said Tova. "You are who you are," said our mother. "It was a dream," I said. Our mother was in the habit of making stuff up, using words to pave the way. She liked to have fun with us. I could see her scribbling away in her notebook. "What are you writing?" "We need to get you a towel." "No, what, really?" "We need to get home so you can dry off." I knew that's not what my mother had written. More likely she'd written the names Ta and Da, or the words whirligig and bugaboo. That, or she'd made a sketch of my fall from the hackberry tree, and she'd taken notes for a future story. Some story never before told of Ons who, like me, fell from the sky and landed in the water. She'd likely title it Ons, the Early Days, or Ons with a Splash. In the familiar story of Ons, the one told by our mother on previous days, he was already an essential part of the world. He ate fish with the bears, he swam with the river otters, and played in the country of childhood without once thinking about his purpose, because no need to think about purpose when you know it by heart. Then, when Ons had grown into a man, he became king of the entire spot, which didn't sound like much of an accomplishment to Cricket and me. But Mama said the entire spot was like one place with every other place in it. It was like a gazillion light years of the universe that you could hold in your hand. Sometimes it was better not to argue, just listen. Soon enough, Ons married Iona, who fell from the fresh east. When I asked, "What's fresh east?" Mama said, "Well, it makes the best bread." Which, well, it didn't make any better sense at the time. No matter, Iona became the first woman in the history of the earth to collect rainwater in a stone bowl, and the first to share her opinion, the first also to clean up the messes of others, mostly the messes of Ons, her husband. And later, she became the first person ever to die. For some reason, that last idea stuck with me, that someone was actually the first ever to die, which meant no one had died before Iona. How was that possible? It intrigued me, but I couldn't do much with the idea. Couldn't make a sandwich with it or ride it like a bike. Luckily, though, the thought kept pace inside me as I grew, subtly influencing my thinking over time. In Mama's story, it was sad when Iona died, because the entire spot missed her. No one knew where she'd gone. Her body lay on the ground, still and stone-like. It made no sense that when the trees and the wind and Ons himself talked to her, that Iona no longer answered. It was rude of her not to answer, and Ons got upset. He stamped his feet. He stormed around, throwing rocks and branches far into the lake, as if any of that would bring her back. It only brought ripples to the shore, those ripples from the rocks, were a nice gift, but a far cry from the flesh and blood person Ons wanted. Thinking about it, there must have been ripples when I fell like a stone into the water. Rippling the stillness, I announced my presence on earth. For my mother, this presence became food for the imagination. In her mind, all humans were handed, though sometimes we splashed, to existence. She liked to tell Cricket and me how years back, before there was a Baltimore, Cairo, or Kenya, before even there was the sun, the moon, or Mother Earth herself, human life did not have a home. Everyone hung out in the empty lot with the beggars and bums out back behind the universe. An empty lot behind the universe, I liked the thought. Sometimes, which were always the wrong times, I tried to get my mother to explain that empty lot and how a person could end up there and survive without any earth. She'd look me in the eye, her hands in the pastry dough, and say, "I'll tell you later when the pies are in the oven." But I knew she'd forget, not because she was forgetful, just because by then she'd be baking something new. So, instead, I remember going to ask my father about the empty lot behind the universe. "The one with all the beggars and bums?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And he made up something off the top of his head, like a clever headline in the newspaper. "The universal joint, space to ponder." And because that wasn't very satisfying, he said, "Behind the universe. It's hardly a lot of bunk, but it is a lot to think about." What else to do but sigh and walk away? I had to take matters into my own hands, which I did by reading what my mother had written in her notebook, hoping to fill out the story by invading her privacy. The pages of that notebook were filled with quotes and remarks, small drawings, diagrams. I remember a dot, for example, in the middle of one page, with the word soul next to it. And surrounding that dot was a small circle labeled Earth. And the round Earth sat in the middle of a larger circle marked Universe. Then, on the white of the page that surrounded the universe, she'd written the word God, which I knew she'd written and had erased because I could still see its indented remainder. The erased God was replaced with the word life. Was life the lot behind the universe with all the beggars and bums? The drawing gave no answers, only presented more questions. Soul, earth, universe, life. Everything focused upon that soulful dot. Or maybe all things zoomed out from it. It was impossible to tell just looking at the notebook. And that was only one of her many sketches, but it is one I remember. And at the bottom of that page my mother had written, "All boundaries are permeable." I was 11 then. I didn't know what permeable meant, so I asked. "You've been reading my notebook," said my mother, Rugelach cooling on the kitchen table. It was sitting open on the chair. Some things are meant to be private. But from her tone, I could tell that her notebook was not one of those things. Permeable means that stuff can move through, like a gill net is permeable to water, but not trout. A sheet is permeable to air. Even a wall is. I nodded. It reminded me of a joke from my father. "Papa says, 'What invention lets you go through a wall?'" "Invention? It's a door," I said. "There you go. We need more inventions like that. Door makers are my heroes." "Who do you know who makes doors?" I asked. "Dormice, of course." I sighed. The Rugelach smelled good. I turned my attention its way. "It's not for us." "Why not?" "You can get to know anything if you find the right door," said my mother. "Stonehenge? Sure thing. The lost island of the Atlantic? Atlantis. Why people hate one another? I asked. You mean why there's cruelty and wars? I mean, why hate? Well, you hate broccoli. I just don't like the taste. I don't want it to have a bad life. Maybe people need to see that we are all part of one big picture. How? I asked. Well, there's a door somewhere, said my mother. There's a way to understand things. What if the dormice locked the door? Why would they do that? Doors have locks on them, I said. Dormice don't do locks. Whoever then? Maybe when a door is locked, that's hating. Then you need to unlock it. You have every right to know things better, but you've got to be open. I thought the door needs to be open. Well, you've got to be open first. Being open, that's the opposite of hate, like cupped hands, ready to receive. My mother held out her hands, covered with flour, and waited. If you are open, you welcome everything, like rain when you're thirsty. Something to drink. Makes sense, I thought. Then, miracle of miracles, her hands were full of water. She moved them to her lips and sipped what she held. I heard the slurp of the liquid and then the sigh of my mother's quenched thirst. I saw her dripping wet hands. Cricket and I drank our mother's words. We satisfied ourselves with them because we couldn't eat her pies or rugelach, which were rarely for us. In her notebook, she had sketches and notes, recipes, dates, and reminders. She also had lyrics to songs that popped into her head. Once it was when the world was young, the universe gave to the world a son. The boy was born with a joyous splash, and his sister came tumbling after like laughter. Round and round the hours they went, having fun till their fun was spent. Some days went slow, others faster, always avoiding disaster with laughter. Mama sang that song to us, following my fall, sung to the tune of Jack and Jill. I think she thought it funny, me falling in. Or, a better word, interesting. Our mother thought everything interesting, and soon so did I. Interest to her was what jewelry was to other mothers, a prized possession. It was her most favorite word, an early favorite of mine as well, together with home run, popover, sassafras, cumulonimbus, and periwinkle. Growing up, Cricket and I came upon endless curiosities. Will-o'-the-wisps in the swamp, flying squirrels gliding through some woman's woods where we visited one summer, and a Y oak so old, according to our father, that it could, and it did, tell first-hand stories of Hamilton and Washington. Thanks to our good fortune, though, we never came upon the war in a swarm of bees. But sometimes we did meet with the ouch in a thorny touch. The days were packed with such puns, mostly supplied by our father. Each day came loaded. There were chickens who bathed in the sun, crabs who nibbled on hot dogs, a cloud in the shape of the Buddha. The list could go on. And as I grew, I saw the world take shape with nothing to make of that shape but how it moved me, or how it held me perfectly still. One day, for instance, there it was, a field of flitting, alliterating butterflies in the late summer sun. I raced with my eyes trying to follow them. And then a different disturbing day, when I was coming on 14, a man at the end of his rope hanging from a beam in his bedroom, and I in the doorway, standing quiet as the grave. But neither butterflies nor tragedy were there on that morning when I turned 9. Beauty and sorrow would be things to take up later, after I had grown a bit and gotten my footing, after I'd established a better appreciation of the world, after I was warm and dry, after a good breakfast even. The morning I fell from that hackberry tree, I knew very little of the order or disorder of the world around. It was my birthday then. I sat in the cool, gleaming water, hungry minnows swimming nearby, and my sister and mother waiting me out. "I'm fine," I said, after my fall, playing it cool for a 9-year-old boy. Growing up, things were usually fine with me. I felt secure in the middle ground of fair to middling. I felt protected in okay. I didn't jump too high for joy or weep deep, bitter tears. Never did I experience the otherworldly ecstasy some people get when eating a bowl of peach cobbler. And not once did I experience the smallness and the unwantedness of being picked last for a team. Mostly my days were simply pretty good, and I rode at that fulcrum, taking things as they came. As I kept my balance in the mud of the creek, Mama and Cricket kept their eyes on me. The frisky minnows had found me too. They nibbled at my pants, hoping I was something good to eat. The water chilled me, but the sun reached out with its rays, and that made all the difference. Whether we think about it or not, we all long for the honesty and faithfulness of the sun. Same as what we want from our parents, our teachers, our pets. A stone we pick from the ground and hold for emotional support. The flowering pear by the front door. You name it. The sunlight burst through the trees that day. It blasted a hole without destroying the branches or leaves, without making a sound. The morning of my 9th birthday. Where had I been all the years till then? Mama and Cricket, up on the bank, sun in the sky. I liked what I saw. I woke, I walked, I fell, I saw, I liked. I remember thinking, I like the sun likes me. It doesn't make fun of people, it makes light. That may have been my first pun. Later I told it to my father, and he gave me the thumbs up, which was his way of showing support when he was busy with other things. "Why are you just sitting there?" asked Tova, watching me in the water. "I'm not just sitting," I said. "We need to get you some dry clothes," said my mother, "and a good warm breakfast to boot." Finally, I stood and dripped. I thought of waffles, though I didn't really like them. "Celtis occidentalis," said my mother, which I heard as celery and lettuce. Was that her choice for breakfast? "It's the common hackberry tree," she explained. I looked at the tree leaning over the water. The name meant nothing to me. "One of my father's favorites," she said. I had never met her father, who had taken his own life when my mother was 14. At the time of my fall, I knew very little about my grandfather, except that he liked trees, just like my own father, and that his name was Ash, like you find in a fireplace, but also like the tree, ash tree. When I was young, trees were everywhere. Some trees were ashes, some were honey locusts and willows. Some of the hackberry branches skimmed the wavery surface of the water. It was a delicate touch that felt good to my eyes. "What you fell out of," said my mother. "What?" "Not the sky, the hackberry." "I know. Not the universe either. I didn't notice it till now. The universe? No, the tree, she said. Scraggly old thing. What's for breakfast? I asked, climbing up the bank, heavy with water. What do you want? It's your birthday. Of course I knew it was my birthday. How old are you again? I shouldn't have to tell you. When I grow up, I'm going to know things for myself. I'm going to know them by heart. I'm not going to ask people to give me the answers. I figured this would get to my mother and make her act more motherly. But Tova spoke up, saving our mother from my trap. He's 9. I want waffles. It's up to Oliver today, said our mother. I've got a burning desire to make something. I loved my mother's homemade beaten biscuits with butter and honey, peach cobbler, cinnamon toast, even oven-baked potato frittatas. Years back, we sang a song about that. Tater frittata, tater frittata, tater, tater, tater frittata. I liked breakfast ham when I was young. Canadian bacon, scrapple. But Tova, young as she was, did not like meat, mostly because Papa brought home this baby pig once, the same time Mama was reading Charlotte's Web to us. We were outside then, under one of our favorite trees, the willow. Tova and I shared many favorites: trees, stories, Rocky Road ice cream. The pig went mostly to Tova, however, because she was the magnet for its iron heart. Little piggy sat down beside her in the dirt and rested its pink head in her lap. Talk about miracles. It was all the proof my sister needed. I think that pig was her very first love. Cricket and animals, the two went together like summer and baseball, or an envelope and its thank you letter. There was this painting my father once showed me of lions and lambs and bunnies and girls all sharing the same world in silence, without envy or violence. Peaceable kingdom, he called it, by some painter with an H. That's how Cricket wanted things to be. Animals needed our love, not our ovens. Papa said that, or maybe it was Cricket. Either way, I was not one to argue, even though I liked bacon, and even though I knew everyone would eventually die, no matter how much love they received. At least, that's how it was according to Charlotte's Web. Spiders, pigs, farm animals, and, yes, girls, all would one day die. E.B. White had it figured. He'd written the story about friendship and change. Sad, but true, death comes to the earth. It comes to the trees, to the mountains, to everyone in the family. And though for me as a boy growing by the shore with the crabs and the nettles in the murky salt water, with the sun raying through the trees, its light marking my days and molding my mind, though for me in those early days death held no sway, I did hear about it on the news. Occasionally I saw it by the side of the road, and the smell was bad. And even though I knew that life could go wrong, I was protected from most hardships and struggles, from any cruelty and loss. There were blue skies, red skies, black skies with stars, and there were clouds that came over me but never to dump their storm. Sometimes a sheep fly or dragonfly landed on my arm, a bee sting, I remember it. It was probably my fault. And outside under our willow, Tova and I listened to our mother read Charlotte's Web, its joy and kindness expressed through my mother's voice. I felt the friendly hold of her voice like an arm upon my shoulder. I felt the potency, the way. I felt the waves she spoke with, like a tide rising and falling, rising again, nothing you could do to stop it. And why would you even want to stop it? No need to stop it. Let the tide happen, and you can happen along with it. Let yourself be the story, and the two of you can move as one. I felt my mother's words roll and carry my body, in and out, up and down, so that every movement was also my own, so that every word, every world lived inside me to begin with. And that was not all. There was the world around me, too. There was the world outside that wasn't part of any story. Unless it was. How could I tell? There were things the world around me was trying to say. I sat and listened to my mother read Charlotte's Web. I watched the world as it spoke to me with its colors and light. How could I ever keep it all straight? Stories, stories everywhere. There was just so much world and words and things to feel. I felt the narrative wind when it blew across my skin, and the sunlight language wherever it landed. And when I turned my head, I saw my sister beside me, sitting in the shade, stroking her very own personal Wilbur, rubbing its pink ears, tiny pink ears, as she listened to her mother read on. And off in the distance, my father, there he went, walking somewhere. He wasn't aware of what was happening for us. What story was he listening to as he headed to the car? My father, the car, the sunlight, and Charlotte. So much to see and hear, and all of it something to pay attention to. What was I doing back as a boy? What was I perceiving? Because I didn't always pay attention to what my mother read or to what Charlotte was saying. I got distracted. Sometimes there was a rustle of leaves, maybe it was a bear, or a jet flying overhead all the way from China. And there went our car, with a dent on its hood to grab my attention. Papa driving off, and our dog licking herself, and flowers, all colors, tilting in the gentle breeze. I did not want to miss out on things. It was a good place to be, I knew that. I knew at a young age that I wanted to be here. I knew there was something about people and things, including the passing wind and the distant rattly, rumbly sound of trucks, something that made me feel at home. I knew that there was much to be gotten. The green of each growing leaf, the decay of each rotting smell. It was something that just wouldn't stop talking to me, telling me stuff, stuff, stuff. What was it wanting to tell? Recommendations of this world? News about itself? News about us? Us, whoever we are? Cricket and me, Fern and Wilbur, and Charlotte, and Mama, and Vincent Cummings, Frederick Turner, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, the Moses of Maryland, the Chesapeake Bay, the minnows in the creek, and that painter named Hicks. Oh, I must have heard it somewhere in my soul, even if I wasn't fully listening. The wind through the leaves, the waves on the shore, each person's body like mine happening somewhere at once, every person's chance in this world, each person, each animal, each tree, each stone fitting in here. Somewhere I knew, or I started to know. From that moment on, from the moment I fell out of that tree, I began to see. I began to understand. It began to make sense that I was never alone. There was companionship in the world around. "I'm fine," I said, and got out of the water, dripping wet. 9 years old. I thought to follow Cricket's vegetarian example. I'd follow it for this one breakfast at least. It took me till I was older to give up meat. To me as a boy, ham tasted delicious, also lamb chops and dark, fatty bluefish, fresh from the estuaries of the bay. So as far as breakfast on my 9th birthday was concerned, I could forego the meat to please my sister, but I would not go so far as to allow waffles. I just didn't like them. I opted for a breakfast of homemade biscuits, no ham, hot chocolate though, which everyone liked, soft boiled eggs for breaking open, for spilling out and dipping into. Then I'd leave some scraps and tastes of everything on my plate for good girl Jessica, who always begged so patiently at my feet. It was just too difficult not to give her what she wanted. Wait for it. Wait. Such a good dog. A floppy-eared basset hound who liked the smell of dead raccoon. She loved the sound of an opening door, and she gave ticks to us all summer long free of charge. It didn't even have to be someone's birthday. So, wait, just a bit more. The best dog, really. Don't bark. Try not to drool. Make yourself ready for what's coming your way. And much to my mother's annoyance, good girl Jessica got what she wanted in the end. From my sly hand to her open mouth. Sometimes, if lucky, she even licked the plate. And home that day after breakfast, Papa entered the kitchen, his pants crusted with mud. He patted Jess on the head and lifted the plate from the floor, carrying it to the sink. Papa had been planting a new tree for my birthday. It was a cherry just outside my bedroom window. Tova wanted a cherry too, but Papa said she'd have to wait till she turned 9. One was for Birch, same as our last name. 2 for Ash, for building bridges and baseball bats. 3, a sycamore out by the road. 4, a red maple. 5, a flowering pear. 6, a sharp green holly with bright red berries, perfect for Christmas time. 7, a sassafras with its mitteny leaves. 8, a dogwood. And 9, a black cherry. "Everyone loves a cherry tree," my father said, as he sat at the table leaning back, putting one foot on the table and crossing it with the other. He remembered climbing a big old black cherry as a child, sitting in its branches, plucking the fruit, one sweet juicy piece after another, chewing on the flesh and spitting out the pits. "The blossoms express the transient nature and poignancy of things," he explained, not bothering to define his terms to Tova and me. "Trancy M. Nature and the Poison Onion Rings." A pretty good title, we had to admit, hoping our father might tell us a story. But he didn't tell. There was no adventure in his words, only more sentiment. "The fruit of the cherry tree," he went on, slipping back into memory, "something we all need. It is sweetness of life." When I was a boy, I fell into place. Saturday, the 3rd of June, 64 years ago. No mistaking it. Clearly it was one of the first memories to resonate with me. 9-year-old boy, I had no regrets. I had instead a family nearby, supportive. I rode along and let the family tell itself. The whine of a mosquito seeking blood, or the sound of my father's axe making cuts. I saw what I saw. I heard what I heard, taking it all in. Parents at the kitchen table, eggs and biscuits on the plate, a sister sipping hot chocolate, and Jessica eagerly awaiting scraps. And outside the day spun on, spring to summer, summer to fall, winter clouds topped the sky, and blades of spring grass rooted to the earth. And inside there were changes in the works. Every season drew more shades and opened gates so I could see, so I could go on. I listened to the wind rustle through the dry autumn leaves, felt the sun flood my eyes and burn my skin when summer came a-calling. At times it was a pain, but why point fingers? At times, for sure, I did blame my family, sulked in my room, had a bad day. But not for long. Funny story. Once I got so mad that I hit my friend Maple Tree with a baseball bat. "Why'd you do that?" the maple said, and hit me right back in the nose, bloodied it, with the very same bat. I suppose that was a lesson in reciprocation. And how fortunate that I was able to learn from my mistakes. It was never long before I returned to my family, no matter the hurt, without a grudge. How fortunate that nothing inimical took control from me, but rather most things existed side by side, so I might grow on my own terms to include them all. The stump, the stubbed toe, the sun itself, the burn on my skin, the one-note hum of hummingbirds, even worrisome wasps. I included them for no other reason than how could I not? How could I not find a way to get along with the given day and its 101 moods? If I wanted to build a dam or a bridge, if I hoped to navigate a particular wind or master the branches of a fine climbing tree, well, it wasn't up to the wind or the tree to let me in. I had to discover the way. I had to not hate. I had to open doors, which is a natural thing for a child, and was easy enough for me, as I liked most everything, except for turnips and broccoli, and striking out with a runner on third, and yes, that stubbed toe, third stub of the very same toe. Come on, world, let a boy run. Because I just wanted to go with enthusiasm. Why not like what comes your way, speaking its mind and opening yours further, little by little, to something new? It doesn't matter what shows up, but rather that when it does pop in for a visit, you see for yourself how ultimately and intimately you are related. Such wovenness of feeling, such a braided understanding did not happen then, not when I was 9, not for many years. But every new growth has to start somewhere. It is good practice to take to heart the inevitability of others, including shade trees and songbirds, the individuality too. I wonder how differently we would treat an unpopular virus or the meanest of snakes if we knew at the heart of their being was not only a wish for love, but also a need that love would come from us. Is it possible to love a snake? I think so. Is it possible to love a stone? It is. And it is good practice to include the sun on a cloudy day and the distant calm during a raging storm. Good to know that grief is as much a part of the world as is joy, not to mention every runt of a pig and every last person. They all need mentioning, thinking about, too. I can't imagine one being, human or otherwise, not worth caring about. And who knows where that care will lead, but without it, I won't get anywhere, nowhere real at least. And though I wouldn't say I had gotten far by my 9th birthday, I would call it a step in the right direction.